But now let's talk about Syria and the diplomatic background to the ongoing crisis. Yesterday, President Obama met the Turkish Prime Minister, Prime Minister Erdogan, to talk about Syria. Also, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is going to meet the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, today. Obviously, Syria on the agenda. Incidentally, after his meeting, the US President said that he had seen evidence that chemical weapons had been used. So where are we in the diplomatic game? Nabila Ramdani is a journalist, analyst on the Arab world. Very warm welcome to you, Nabila. Can I begin by asking, it looks like both sides militarily seem to have given up on any form of negotiation or diplomacy. So where are we diplomatically? Do you think that, Turkey, America, Russia, they still believe in it as a track?
Well, I think what is absolutely clear is that the priority is to end this despicable war in Syria. And we've seen atrocities committed by both sides. And we've seen everything from infanticide to the alleged use of chemical weapons in a conflict which has now been going on for more than 2 years, and which the international community has done absolutely nothing to stop. And it may be reassuring to some to hear about talks and to hear world leaders condemning the combatants on both sides, and especially Bashar al-Assad's. But I'm afraid that it is deeply, deeply frustrating to hear Obama still going on, coming out indeed with platitudes about there being a need to talk, and indeed he reinforces the fact that there's no magic formula to resolve this conflict. And this horrifically, at this horrifically late stage in the civil war, this is simply not enough to come up with platitudes like that.
Can I ask? There's one thing that was interesting in the report that we were playing yesterday by our correspondent Ian Pannell from Sarakeb, which found alleged evidence of the use of poison gas. That the people there were saying to Ian, they were saying, surely this is a red line. This must be a red line. They're aware of the diplomatic conversations that are being had, of the positions that are being taken by figures like President Obama. But what must they think? Because they want action, but it's never going to happen, is it?
Well, I mean, it's very clear for the Syrian people in particular that the international community, the West, and indeed other major powers are failing in their duty to humanity, by which I mean that men, women and children are being slaughtered on a daily basis. And with new allegations emerging of the use of chemical weapons, you can see why the Syrian people feel that they are being led down by the international community. And we're not just talking about the latest revelations about or strongest evidence about the use of chemical weapons, but we're talking about, more than 100,000 people who have been killed so far, and the horrific humanitarian situation, which includes more than 1.5 million people who have fled the country, and more than 4 million people who have been displaced internally. So for the Syrian people, this surely must be a red line enough.
I was going to ask what you thought would actually constitute a red line, because if it's not, as appears, chemical weapons, because it's so hard to prove their use, is there a sort of a number of dead that forms a red line? Do you draw that line at 100,000 or 110,000? Is there any point in talking about such things as red lines, or we just have to accept that this situation is a stalemate and it's going to continue?
Well, I think it has reached a point where, in fact, I would call it crisis creep, because mission creep was what the West and the international community feared that would happen in case of an intervention. But crisis creep is surely a new jargon that needs to be introduced in the, in terms of international relations, where we are seeing this slow motion of horror unfolding on a daily basis. And it's not just about Syria any longer. It's about a wider conflict in the regions, where we are seeing global players compete for geostrategic influence in the area, and various forms of alliances forming in the area, using Syria as a battlefield to vie for influence.
Very interesting idea. Crisis creep. Many thanks indeed, as ever. Nabila Ramdani speaking to us. The issue of refugees, by the way, I see in some of the British papers they're reporting that it was 10 weeks ago that the millionth refugee fled Syria. And just in those past 10 weeks, the UN now estimates that the number has gone to 1.5 million. So 500,000 people have fled Syria in just the past 10 weeks.